She stood in her perfectly manicured yard, phone in hand, shrieking about suspicious activity and threatening to have me arrested for not trimming my hedges. What she didn't know was that every glare, every complaint, every call she made was exactly what I needed. I wasn't just her new neighbor. I was the federal agent sent to take down the corrupt HOA from within, and Karen had just walked right into my trap. Welcome to the HOA Discover channel. If you find out this story interesting, hit the like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's get back to the story. The sun blazed down on the quiet suburban cul-de-sac of Crestwood Pines, a seemingly idyllic neighborhood tucked behind iron gates and manicured hedges. Birds chirped, children's bikes lined driveways, and sprinklers hissed rhythmically across perfectly trimmed lawns. From the outside, it was everything you'd want in a safe, upscale community. But I wasn't here to make friends. I was here on orders. To them, I was just the new guy, Alex Warren, a single man in his early 30s with a small moving truck, a golden retriever named Max, and a shy, polite smile. My cover was tight. Real ID, real backstory, and a fake job title, freelance web developer working from home. The neighbors didn't need to know that I was a 10-year veteran of federal law enforcement, assigned to a corruption probe involving local homeowners associations. The agency had received over a dozen whistleblower complaints from this neighborhood alone, but no one could ever get close enough to prove anything until now. I pulled up around 8:03 a.m., exactly as planned, right when the neighborhood started to stir. People like Karen liked to see who was moving in. Surveillance wasn't always high-tech. Sometimes you just had to let your targets watch you. I knew the eyes would be on me before the truck even stopped. And right on cue, she emerged. Karen. Mid-50s, platinum blonde bob, crisp pastel blouse tucked into slacks, and a posture like a drill sergeant. She wasn't just a resident. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA. Clipboard in hand, phone holstered like a sidearm, she marched across the street as I unloaded a single box onto the curb. "Excuse me," she barked, with the kind of sharpness that suggested this wasn't her first confrontation. "Are you the new owner of 122 Crestview?" I turned, slow and casual. "Yes, ma'am. Just moved in this morning." Her eyes narrowed. "Did you notify the HOA office? We have specific regulations for moving trucks. They're only allowed between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Apologies. The moving company ran early." I lied smoothly. "I'll be done quickly." Her gaze drifted over my truck, then to Max, who was sniffing a mailbox post. "Dogs must be leashed at all times. And you'll want to remove any boxes from the curb within 30 minutes. We pride ourselves on appearance here." I nodded with practiced humility, though every word she spoke confirmed what we'd suspected. This wasn't about keeping up appearances. It was about power, control, and likely something much worse. Later that afternoon, as I unloaded the last of the boxes, I noticed Karen lingering behind her window blinds, watching like a hawk. She wasn't even subtle about it. Within the first 6 hours, I received a knock on my door from a courtesy officer, a local volunteer appointed by the HOA, letting me know that my mailbox paint was faded and non-compliant. The mailbox was barely 5 years old and pristine. That night, I activated the internal house surveillance system and uploaded the initial footage to our secured server. Body cam recordings of the first encounter were already en route to HQ. I reviewed my briefing notes again. Rumors of HOA embezzlement, illegal fines, coordinated harassment, and targeting of minority residents. All under Karen's iron grip. The beauty of infiltration is patience. You learn the rhythms, the routines, the dynamics. You let them underestimate you. And Karen had already pegged me as just another rule breaker to dominate. Perfect. 2 days in, a citation appeared on my door. Violation number 12, unauthorized garden decor. I had a small solar lantern set in the flower bed. Nothing gaudy, nothing flashy. But it was outside the HOA's approved list. Another warning. 3 days in, I was approached by a soft-spoken man walking his elderly mother. He leaned in and whispered, "Watch your back. Don't trust her." That was all he said before quickly retreating into his home. By the end of the first week, I had received 5 notices, 3 verbal warnings, and 1 threat to be fined. Karen had mobilized the entire HOA against me like I was an infection in her body, something to purge. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just any bacteria. I was the cure. By the second morning in Crestwood Pines, I had already established a basic surveillance rhythm. Cameras hidden inside porch lights, audio recorders embedded in flower pots, and a live feed routed directly to the Bureau's off-site storage. My mission was clear: expose the corruption within the HOA, and all signs pointed to its president, Karen Whitmore. At 8:17 a.m., right as the sun hit my driveway, I heard the sound of heels on concrete and a polite but cold knock at my door. I already knew who it was. She had hovered outside for 5 full minutes, pacing and rehearsing her speech. I pulled the door open and greeted her with my most charming fake smile. "Good morning," I said, already wearing a basic hoodie and coffee mug to play the relaxed, unaware homeowner. "Can I help you?" Karen stood stiffly, flanked by 2 other HOA board members, one short man with a mustache and narrow eyes, and a taller woman who looked like she regretted being there. Karen, however, was in her element. Her eyes flicked across my porch like a scanner, noting every imperfection, every blade of grass out of line. She didn't even greet me. Instead, she raised the clipboard in her hand like it was a holy book. "We need to review a few things regarding your residency, Mr. Warren." I gestured politely.
Sure.
"Come in." Karen raised a hand, stopping me. "We prefer to conduct HOA business outside. Keeps things transparent." Translation: she wanted to assert dominance. And from the way the other 2 shifted awkwardly behind her, this was clearly her show. I nodded and stepped aside, letting them speak. Karen flipped open her clipboard. "First, your mailbox. It's 2 inches shorter than HOA code, and the color doesn't match our uniform scheme. It'll need to be replaced by the end of the week." I gave a slow nod. Didn't realize there was a color code. "We mailed out a compliance handbook 3 years ago," she replied briskly. "But don't worry, I brought you a fresh one." She shoved a plastic binder into my hands, nearly 200 pages thick, filled with rules, subsections, amendments, and footnotes. I had already reviewed the digital version, of course, during my prep phase. It read more like military policy than neighborhood guidelines. Karen wasn't finished. "Your dog, Max, I believe? I saw him off-leash yesterday morning. That's a violation. He was in my front yard. I was right next to him." She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Still a violation." The man behind her cleared his throat, attempting to add something, but Karen cut him off. "Also, your trash bins were placed outside at 6:45 a.m. on a non-collection day. HOA bylaws state bins can only be placed curbside after 7 p.m. the night before pickup and must be removed by 9 a.m. on collection day." I almost laughed. "So, you're saying I got a garbage violation before I even unpacked?" "Rules are rules, Mr. Warren," she replied curtly. I flipped open the binder to a random page. There were sections on the length of holiday lights, the maximum decibel level for lawnmowers, and a mandatory HOA logo placement on all exterior house numbers. It was ludicrous, but deliberately so. The point wasn't to keep order. It was to manufacture violations. Karen handed me a manila envelope with a formal, welcome letter and my first set of fees, monthly dues, compliance penalties, and an administrative onboarding charge of $175, which I knew from internal reports had been illegally added to nearly 40 new homeowners in the last 18 months. "We pride ourselves on excellence in Crestwood Pines," she said smugly. "The HOA ensures everyone contributes equally." But I already knew better. The HOA board had been siphoning funds through shell landscaping companies, charging residents for repairs that never happened. They used inflated penalties to pressure homeowners into silence, especially retirees, immigrants, and lower-income residents. Those who resisted were met with threats, legal notices, and public shaming in HOA newsletters. I had all the files, but I needed first-hand proof. Karen turned to leave, clearly satisfied. "Oh, one more thing," she said, pausing on my porch step. "You'll need to remove that porch swing. It's not on the approved list of furnishings." I raised an eyebrow. "It came with the house." She shrugged. Still non-compliant. You'll find the correct options on page 88 of your handbook. I stood there in silence as the three walked away, her clipboard bouncing with every step. The man with the mustache threw me a sheepish glance, but Karen didn't look back. She was used to people obeying, folding, backing down, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. Later that evening, I reviewed the body cam footage and cross-referenced Karen's demands with the HOA charter filed with the county. Half the rules she cited didn't even exist in the legal bylaws. They had been internal updates, unapproved, unofficial amendments written by Karen and her inner circle. That was enough for a probable cause report. But I wasn't here to rattle cages. Not yet. First, I needed to become the enemy she couldn't ignore. I closed the binder and set it on the kitchen counter, already planning my next move. The real trap wasn't the one she laid for me. It was the one I was building, piece by piece, with every smug comment, every fake citation, every knock on my door. Karen didn't know it yet, but she had just declared war on a federal agent. By the time I had reached my third day in Crestwood Pines, I had already collected a folder full of HOA violation notices. Each was printed on heavy stock paper, folded with surgical precision, and stamped with the same threatening red ink. NO compliant. Response required. The first few were annoying. The next ones became suspicious. And the ones after that? Dangerous. It started with the grass. I had barely set up my bed frame when the first notice arrived, taped to my door with blue painter's tape like a badge of shame. It read, Violation #118B. Lawn height exceeds maximum allowable limit, 2.5 inches. There was a photo attached, a grainy, zoomed-in picture of a patch of grass near my mailbox. From the angle, I could tell it had been taken from across the street, probably by Karen, using her cell phone in stealth mode. Except she wasn't stealthy at all. I looked out my front window and, sure enough, there she was, standing on her porch with that ever-present clipboard, pretending to water plants that didn't need watering. Our eyes met briefly, and she smiled with the smugness of someone who thought she'd just won the first battle. But I wasn't here to win battles. I was here to end the war. That same afternoon, I parked my black SUV, bureau-issued but registered to a fake leasing company, in my driveway. Not the street. Not on anyone's property. My own driveway. And yet, by morning, another violation was there. Violation #45A, improper vehicle, commercial appearance, without HOA sticker approval. Apparently, my SUV was intimidating. According to the notice, it didn't align with the aesthetic of the community. I ran the plate through the bureau's back end to double-check. It had no markings, no lights, no exterior tools or racks. It was cleaner than most of the neighbors' cars. This wasn't about the vehicle. It was about control. But the real kicker came on day 5. A third violation. This one almost comical if it hadn't been so calculated. Violation #62C. Unauthorized sound-producing fixtures. Non-standard wind chimes. I had hung a small bamboo wind chime under my porch overhang. It made the softest, most relaxing sound you could imagine. But the notice described it as audibly disruptive and culturally inconsistent with community decorum. That phrase, culturally inconsistent, was more than a red flag. It was a blaring siren, especially when paired with what I'd already uncovered. Several of the whistleblower complaints the Bureau had received had included stories about Karen and her board targeting residents of color, immigrants, and anyone who didn't conform to their suburban utopia fantasy. Now I had physical evidence of racial or cultural bias disguised as policy enforcement. I ran a silent report through the Bureau's compliance tracker. Sure enough, the last 10 wind chime violations had all gone to non-white residents. And nearly all of them had sold their homes within 6 months of their first citation. This wasn't just overreach. This was systemic harassment. That night, I reviewed the footage from my porch camera. Karen had walked right up, measured my lawn with a ruler, and taken photos of my wind chime. It was deliberate, personal. But the most disturbing moment came at 2:43 a.m. My motion sensors triggered a silent alert. Someone was on my lawn. I tapped into the night vision feed and watched a figure, hooded, average build, step up to my mailbox and slip something inside. Not a normal letter. It was too small.
Too thin.
I waited until morning to retrieve it. Inside the box was a single piece of paper, no envelope, no stamp. Handwritten. It said, "You should leave before it gets worse." No signature. No fingerprint residue. No ink smudges. It wasn't just intimidation, it was a threat. Quiet, calculated, and perfectly timed. I scanned the note into my encrypted server, then sent it directly to our threat analysis division. I flagged it under active escalation. Karen and her circle weren't just using bureaucracy to drive people out. They were now escalating to anonymous threats. I knew I had to tread carefully. Blow my cover too soon, and the entire operation could collapse. But wait too long, and the next target might not be someone trained to handle it. Later that day, I got a knock at the door. It was the HOA's vice president, Linda. Middle-aged, soft-spoken, and clearly nervous. Her eyes darted around as she handed me another notice, this time for excessive mailbox ornamentation, even though there wasn't a single decoration on it. I looked at her calmly. "Linda, can I ask you something?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Do you really believe in any of these rules?" She didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, "It's not about belief. It's about what happens if we don't enforce them." That told me everything I needed to know. Karen wasn't just the face of the HOA. She was the hammer. The board feared her. The residents obeyed her. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized, this wasn't a neighborhood. It was a controlled zone. And I was the first intruder to fight back. It was a Wednesday afternoon, unusually quiet in Crestwood Pines. The sun hung low behind overcast clouds, casting a strange gray hue over the pristine lawns and soulless smiles. By this point, I had racked up 7 official HOA violations, everything from mailbox paint shade to unauthorized birdbath placement, and I knew the heat was rising. Not just figuratively. Karen was accelerating her pressure campaign, and I was ready. I had just returned from a quick run to the hardware store, purely to keep up appearances. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw her, Karen, standing at the end of her walkway in her usual pastel blouse and khaki slacks, holding her phone at eye level. Her posture was rigid, lips pressed together in a hard line. She was watching me like I was a criminal returning to the scene of the crime. Except this time, she wanted to escalate. I opened the door and let Max out, leash attached, per code. He barely had a chance to stretch his legs before Karen's voice pierced the air. Hey, what are you doing?" she shrieked, loud enough for 3 porches over to peek outside. I turned slowly, calmly. "Taking my dog out. Is there a problem?" Karen's phone was already dialing. I saw the number flash before she tilted it away. 911. Her voice shifted instantly into performance mode, high-pitched, panicked, urgent. "Yes, hello, I need police. There's a strange man, yes. He just pulled up, he's acting aggressive. He has a large black vehicle with no plates. Yes, he's threatening people. He has a big dog, and oh, I don't feel safe." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched her carefully, my instincts already shifting into protocol. The entire thing lasted 38 seconds. Then she hung up and crossed her arms, smugness back in full effect. "You should have left when I gave you the chance," she said under her breath. 5 minutes later, I heard the distant whoop of a police siren. 2 black and white patrol cars came down the main road and turned toward my driveway. One stopped just behind my SUV. The other cut across the street and blocked the lane, lights flashing. Karen now stood triumphantly near her mailbox, waving them down like she'd saved the whole neighborhood from a terrorist. Both officers stepped out cautiously, hands hovering near their holsters. My heart didn't race. My breathing didn't change. I'd been in worse situations in war zones and criminal stings. But this moment wasn't about my comfort. It was about control, and this was the moment Karen planned to have me publicly humiliated, maybe even arrested. She expected panic. She expected begging. Instead, I calmly reached into my back pocket and pulled out my credentials. "Good afternoon, officers," I said as they approached. "Special Agent Alexander Warren. Federal Bureau of Investigation. They paused, blinked. One took the badge and ID from my hand and examined it carefully. His partner scanned my plate. Within seconds, they knew. One officer's eyes widened slightly, then turned to Karen, who had now stormed over. I told you he was dangerous, she snapped, pointing at me like I was armed and fleeing. The officer handed me back my badge and turned to her. Ma'am, he said evenly, this gentleman is a federal agent. You made a false emergency report. Karen blinked. No, he's lying. He's lying. He doesn't belong here. You have to arrest him. He's not even on the HOA list. The younger officer stepped closer. Ma'am, we ran his credentials. He's real. And this call was not only unnecessary, it could be considered abuse of emergency services. Her mouth opened and closed like a stunned fish. You don't understand. He's dangerous. He has a dog. Max wagged his tail. I stepped forward, voice steady but commanding. Let me make something perfectly clear, Karen. You've been watching me since the day I moved in. You've harassed me, filed fake citations, left threats in my mailbox, and now you've called the police under false pretenses. That's not just an HOA problem. That's a legal one. For the first time, Karen stepped back. The officers took statements and left with warning documentation for the 911 abuse, though I didn't press charges. Not yet. I wanted her to stew. I wanted her to think. But more importantly, I wanted her to escalate. That night, I met with my bureau contact via secure video. I relayed everything. The threats, the patrol encounter, the HOA's consistent abuse of authority. You ready to activate Clean Sweep? My contact asked. I nodded. Do it. Operation Clean Sweep was officially active. That meant deeper investigation. Active wiretaps on all board member communications. Financial audits into HOA records. Interviews with former residents who had been driven out. Karen had just triggered a federal operation by trying to play queen of the cul-de-sac. And she had no idea the storm that was coming. By the time the false 911 call blew up in Karen's face, Operation Clean Sweep was officially greenlit. My mission shifted from passive observation to aggressive investigation. The Bureau didn't just want documentation anymore. They wanted names, money trails, and a paper chain tight enough to put the entire HOA board behind bars. And I was ready. I started small like all good takedowns. Each morning, I jogged the neighborhood with Max, making mental notes of security cameras, traffic patterns, and resident behaviors. Karen thought I was licking my wounds from the cop call incident. In truth, I was planting microphones, syncing signal scramblers, and mapping out the board's routines. Every subtle motion was tactical. Every casual nod was calculated. But the real treasure was digital. Karen had gotten lazy, drunk on power, sloppy in her paranoia. The HOA's internal network, supposedly locked down behind a private firewall, was barely protected. My custom backdoor program, designed by the Bureau's cyber forensics team, had already been installed via the community's public Wi-Fi router hidden in the clubhouse. Within 48 hours, I had admin-level access to every email, payment log, internal memo, and digital record the HOA had stored since 2018. And what I found made my skin crawl. Karen and her inner circle, Vice President Linda, Treasurer Mark Billings, and Compliance Officer Derek Holt, had been running a low-scale but steady embezzlement scheme through fabricated service fees, falsified contractor work, and inflated resident violations. The scam was elegant in its simplicity. First, they'd invent a violation, say, a cracked driveway or an unauthorized solar light. They'd fine the homeowner $150. If the homeowner disputed it, Karen would send threatening legal language or call for a public board hearing where the resident would be humiliated and outvoted. If the homeowner paid, the money was quietly diverted. The trick? The fine was split 3 ways. One portion went into a shadow maintenance fund tied to a fake landscaping company, Verdant Property Solutions LLC, registered out of a UPS store P.O. box. The second slice went into the board's discretionary account for beautification projects, though there were no receipts for any such projects. The final portion was kicked back to the enforcers, Karen and her cronies, disguised as consulting stipends or reimbursements. Every week, the board signed off on these charges unanimously. The minutes were doctored after each meeting. I found 2 versions of the same file, each with different signatures. I dug deeper. In the last 18 months, over $137,000 in unexplained HOA penalties had been collected from residents, with zero documentation of how the money was spent. That money didn't go to fixing sidewalks or repainting mailboxes. It went into private vacations, home upgrades, and in Karen's case, plastic surgery. She had even billed the HOA for a posture-correcting orthopedic treatment, which was, in reality, a luxury spa retreat in Sedona. But the most damning file? A spreadsheet marked D-class residents. It was a handwritten list, scanned and uploaded, of specific homeowners labeled as disruptive, low value, or non-aligned. Each name was marked with a target code P for pressure, E for eviction strategy, or S for silent observation. This wasn't governance. This was a domestic war plan. Karen had weaponized HOA policy into a form of modern redlining. And then came the testimonies. Through back-channel contact, using burner phones and safe meeting spots, I began interviewing former residents who had sold their homes abruptly. One woman, Marta Ramirez, broke down in tears when she saw my badge. "I thought I was crazy," she whispered. "They fine me for wind chimes, then my trash bin, then my dog. I lost everything." Another man, James Patel, showed me forged emails he supposedly sent to the HOA threatening a board member. Except the timestamps showed he was in India on a family trip. He had been driven out under falsified harassment charges. Each story built my case. Each voice added weight to the indictment I was crafting behind the scenes. I compiled it all: spreadsheets, photos, audio recordings, altered documents, email chains, bank statements, into one ironclad file, Crestwood_master, zip. Encrypted. Secure. Ready. But I wasn't working alone anymore. The Bureau had embedded another agent, deeper than me, someone inside the accounting firm that handled HOA taxes. She confirmed the fake vendors. She traced the shell companies to Karen's sister-in-law. And she pulled up the final receipt that tied everything together, a wire transfer of $18,200 to a Cayman Islands account labeled only as KW Investments. Karen Whitmore. Busted. Still, I needed one final piece, something emotional, visual, undeniable. That's when I installed the final hidden camera inside the HOA's private conference room, accessed only by keycard, used only once a week. Karen wouldn't know it, but her next board meeting would be her last. Because next week, when they laughed about the idiot neighbor with the wind chimes, federal agents would be listening live. And this time, the HOA wouldn't be writing fines, they'd be signing confessions. With the evidence piling up, it was no longer a question of if the board would be taken down. It was now a matter of how spectacularly we could make it happen. And that's when the real games began. The Bureau's tech team upgraded my surveillance grid. My house was now the most wired property in Crestwood Pines, equipped with 6 motion-activated mics, infrared wall sensors, and a hidden facial recognition camera tucked into a porch light. Every movement on the street was logged. Every voice above a whisper was archived. Karen, meanwhile, had no idea she was already inside the web. She'd grown cockier since the 911 stunt backfired. Publicly humiliated but too proud to admit defeat, she doubled down on control. New rules started appearing weekly. Handwritten memos slipped into mailboxes, demanding everything from specific garden mulch colors to mandatory HOA flag compliance. One neighbor was fined for leaving their recycling bin visible for 7 minutes after pickup. Another was cited for visible pet hair on their front porch rug. I watched her unravel, slowly, bitterly, methodically, while believing she was still in charge. Then came the board meeting. Thursday, 7:30 p.m. sharp. Crestwood's clubhouse was a beige brick building at the edge of the neighborhood, mostly used for holiday events and overpriced bake sales. But once a month, it transformed into a smoke-free war room, where Karen and her hand-picked crew met to govern. I had already installed 2 hidden mics in the ceiling vents. But this time, I needed more. 2 days before the meeting, using an HOA-branded work shirt I had custom printed, I let myself into the clubhouse under the guise of checking circuit irregularities. Nobody questioned it. I even got a nod from Derek, the compliance officer, as I passed by. Inside the meeting room, I replaced the tissue box on the main table with a dummy version, one containing a high-def pinhole camera and omnidirectional microphone. Then I left a small charging bank under the baseboard, disguised to look like part of the outlet wiring. Everything was in place. Thursday arrived. I dressed the part of an average, quietly submissive resident. Karen barely glanced at me when I passed her house. She was too busy fuming over a resident who had dared to fly a pride flag during non-sanctioned display dates. At 7:28 p.m., the board arrived at the clubhouse. At 7:31, the recording began. I monitored the entire session from my laptop at home, earbuds in, face blank, as the audio streamed live into bureau servers. Karen started the meeting with her usual pretense of order, roll call, treasury update, maintenance review. But 5 minutes in, the real conversation began. "These new homeowners are getting bold," she said, flipping through papers. That one on Willow Lane had the audacity to ask for a variance. A variance, as if we're some public office. Derek chuckled. "Want me to send him one of our scare letters?" "Do it," Karen said. "And add something about unsanitary landscaping. That always gets under their skin." Mark, the treasurer, added, "We should raise the fine cap again. Say it's due to rising insurance premiums." "But we don't have rising premiums," Linda pointed out hesitantly. Karen snapped. "They don't need to know that." That was the line I'd been waiting for. Every word, admissible. Every laugh, damning. And they kept going. They discussed strategies to quietly encourage non-conforming homeowners to move out. They mocked a disabled veteran who had requested a ramp installation. They laughed about falsifying parking complaints to get a renter to break lease. Then Karen leaned back in her chair and said something that sealed her fate. "You know what makes this job so easy?" she said. "The power. These people want to be told what to do. We just make the rules up as we go, and they follow." Silence. Then laughter. I stopped the stream. I didn't need to hear more. I already had enough. But to deliver the final blow, I needed her to confess to the embezzlement. So I baited her. Friday morning, I accidentally left a payment request for an HOA fee in my mailbox, visible, but folded open, revealing a discrepancy in the invoice that only someone inside the scheme would recognize. Sure enough, by Saturday, I caught Karen on camera rifling through my mailbox. The next morning, I received a letter and signed, "No header," typed in all caps. "Remove the payment notice immediately. You're being watched." That was it. I had her for tampering with federal mail. Sunday night, I met with our embedded accountant agent, who had compiled the last financial audit report. It matched everything: the fake vendor addresses, the falsified receipts, the luxury purchases masked as neighborhood beautification. All that was left was timing. Monday morning, I walked Max past Karen's house. She stood in her driveway, watering plants that didn't need water. Her glare was sharp, venomous. "You'll regret coming here," she hissed. I smiled. "I already don't," I replied. In less than 72 hours, she would be sitting across from bureau agents in a federal holding room. And the clubhouse? It would be surrounded by black SUVs and unmarked vans. The neighborhood thought they were living under a strict HOA. They had no idea they were living under federal surveillance. It began with an email. A simple message from Crestwood HOA Operations, sent late Monday night to all residents. Subject: Urgent HOA Mandatory Meeting, Tuesday, 6:30 p.m., Clubhouse. All homeowners are required to attend this emergency session regarding major community compliance changes and financial updates. Attendance is non-negotiable. Failure to appear may result in citations. Karen wrote it, of course. I helped her send it. You see, after the sting recording captured her confessing to manipulating rules and mocking residents, the Bureau gave me one last directive: flush them all out at once. We needed all the board members in one room. Together. No alibis. No escape. So I suggested to Karen, through a planted HOA request for board input, that an emergency meeting would scare residents into compliance after recent uprisings. Her ego did the rest. She loved the drama, and she craved the power of a room full of homeowners beneath her. What she didn't know was that the audience wasn't just her neighbors. It was the FBI. By Tuesday afternoon, unmarked vehicles began arriving. They parked just outside the neighborhood perimeter, 5 black SUVs, 2 surveillance vans, and 1 mobile command trailer. I had never seen so many federal agents in one suburban subdivision. From my earpiece, Agent Bell's voice came through. "We're in position. All channels green. You'll give the signal inside." The clubhouse was packed. Nearly 70 residents stood shoulder to shoulder, some annoyed, others confused, all waiting. Karen stood near the front, adjusting her pastel blouse, holding her famous clipboard like it was Excalibur. The board sat behind her at a long folding table, name placards out, microphones plugged in, faces smug. "I want to thank you all for coming on such short notice," Karen began, her voice echoing off the beige walls. "There has been far too much disorder lately. Too many questions about fines, notices, and what this board is authorized to do." She smiled as if she were Moses descending from the mountain. "And tonight," she continued, "we are putting an end to it." I raised my hand. Karen blinked. "Yes, Mr. Warren?" I stood, calm but firm. "If we're discussing what the HOA is authorized to do, then I think the residents deserve to hear about the shell companies." A murmur spread. Karen's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "The fake vendors. Verdant Property Solutions. Cleanscape Restoration. The accounts in the Caymans. The money you laundered through resident fines." Now the crowd stirred like a waking beast. "What are you talking about?" she spat, eyes narrowing. I pulled a small remote from my jacket pocket and pressed a button. A screen flickered to life behind her. First image, an invoice from Verdant Property Solutions signed by Karen. Second, a Cayman Islands wire transfer to KW Investments. Third, the spreadsheet titled D-Class Residents. The room went silent. Then I spoke clearly into my lapel mic. "This is Special Agent Alexander Warren with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. All individuals listed on this document are now under federal investigation for fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations." The door burst open. Agents filed in with speed and precision, vests marked FBI, folders in hand, earpieces buzzing. Karen staggered backward, eyes wild. No, this is a setup. He's lying. He's one of them. He doesn't even belong here." "That's correct," I said. "I never did." Derek bolted from his seat. 2 agents grabbed him mid-sprint. Linda collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. And Karen? Karen screamed. A full, furious shriek that rang through the room like a dying siren. "This is my neighborhood. I built this. You can't do this to me." But they could. 2 agents approached her with calm authority. One read her Miranda rights. The other pulled out the cuffs. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to defraud, racketeering, harassment, mail fraud, and abuse of position under civil housing regulations." "No, no. You're making a mistake. These people need me. I am the HOA." The last words she spoke as a free woman. They escorted her out to a waiting SUV. Residents parted like the Red Sea. A few gasped. One clapped. And then something beautiful happened. The room erupted in applause. Not polite, hesitant claps, but full, cathartic, thunderous applause. Years of fear, resentment, silenced complaints, all released in a single, electric moment. For the first time in a decade, the people of Crestwood Pines stood tall. One woman leaned over and whispered to me, tears in her eyes, "Thank you. We thought nobody would ever stop her." I nodded once. That's why I was sent. By nightfall, federal notices were posted on the clubhouse doors. The HOA board was officially dissolved pending investigation. A third-party fiduciary would oversee community management. All improperly collected fines were frozen. Refunds were pending. Karen's castle of control had crumbled, not with fire or violence, but with truth and evidence. The next morning, Max and I walked the neighborhood as we always did. But this time, people waved, smiled, talked freely. No more clipboard. No more shadow government. No more threats taped to mailboxes. Just neighbors finally free. 3 months had passed since the arrests. Crestwood Pines had changed, not in its outward appearance, which still gleamed with flower beds and painted shutters, but in its soul. The neighborhood no longer felt suffocated by silence or fear. People waved freely. Children played without constant supervision. For the first time in years, laughter echoed down the sidewalks instead of whispers of who might be next on the HOA's hit list. The board was gone. Karen was still awaiting trial, denied bail after prosecutors presented evidence of intimidation, destruction of records, and attempted obstruction. Her name had become a cautionary tale not just in Crestwood, but across the county, the HOA president who fell to her own paranoia and greed.
And as for me,
I stayed just long enough to finish the job. The Bureau had wrapped Operation Clean Sweep with glowing commendations. Multiple residents came forward to testify. More former victims, even those who had moved out years before, returned to share their stories. With their help, federal housing reforms were quietly introduced in state legislature to prevent similar abuse across other neighborhoods. I left quietly. No badge-flashing exit. No public thank you. Just a quiet sale listing posted one night, and an unmarked truck that pulled away before sunrise. I didn't need applause. Justice was its own reward. But on the day I left, a small package appeared on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a hand-carved wooden plaque that read, "For the neighbor who gave us our neighborhood back. Crestwood Pines." Max barked softly as we drove away, his nose pressed against the window, tail wagging at the sights he now knew were safe. As we passed the gate, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. No more Karen. No more fear. Just a place finally allowed to breathe again.